Between 1949 and 1974, Professor Nicholas Pevsner, a German émigré art historian, toured the counties of England, compiling a 46-volume guide to every building he thought was of interest, from Stonehenge to Centre Point.
What's happened to that tower? That upper part is sitting at an angle on the bottom.
Pevsner's guides, regularly updated, are unique. Nothing quite like them exists anywhere else in the world.
Well, now for Barrow. Mind that dog.
In this series, 6 contemporary travellers take to the road, with Pevsner's Buildings of England as their guide.
Surrey, one of those English counties that will not fit into the traditional pattern. It was so remote in the Middle Ages that it does not possess a large medieval parish church. Yet today there is hardly anywhere in the county where one can feel free of London.
Strange things happen on the edges of places, and here in Sutton, where Greater London splashes onto Surrey, you can appreciate Pevsner's untypical confusion about the county. I was born here, and I grew up aware that you seem to live between 2 opposed views. On the one side, to the north, there's London, mysterious, magnetic, glamorous. On the other side, to the south, there's the North Downs, where the roads get smaller and the houses get bigger. Most of the people who live here commute between these 2 views, with work in London and home in Surrey. They live in suburbia, an environment I know like the back of my hand. But how well do you know the back of your hand? The only way I'm going to find out is to test my own understanding of my home county against Pevsner's steely architectural gaze.
A history of English medieval architecture could be written without once mentioning a surviving Surrey building. A history of the suburb could almost be written without going outside the county. All through the county there are these paradoxes, and somehow Surrey always seems to get the worst of the bargain. Like Southern California, Surrey is entirely directed to serving urban man. Box Hill Station, a delightful, rather ecclesiastical little building. Porch at the side with elaborate Gothic capitals. Turret with weather vane. In the centre of the county, the River Mole cut a valley through the chalk, which has become, thanks to the 18th century, a model of sophisticated parkland. Beside it, Box Hill is a case of the well-known view being deservedly famous, for the slopes underneath are concave, and the onlooker seems about to topple down on Dorking.
You know, Box Hill is the perfect place from which to start a journey through this county. It's like the hanging rock of Surrey, an outcrop of raw nature in the midst of an otherwise historically tamed and landscaped countryside. It's a penthouse over the picturesque, and in Surrey, which E.M. Forster once described as a land of amenities, a view, more often than not, is the final reward for hard work. But views look in as well as out. They reflect us back to ourselves. And for Pevsner, I think, views were really nothing more than a vantage point from which to assess the field of study. For all its accuracy and architectural know-how, I must say that I find Pevsner's guide to be rather like a map to an invisible country. He gives you the bare bones of fact, but you have to let your imagination fill in the rest. Each building in this guide raises all kinds of questions in your mind. And so to travel with Pevsner is to take a spiritual journey, to find yourself as much as anything.
Lacey, 1 mile south of Great Bookham. The original house was medieval. The second house, built in 1631, was bought by Sheridan, the playwright. He called it the nicest place within a prudent distance of town in England. That is still fair comment. There are unspoiled grounds all round and a fine view south across a valley to the crest of the North Downs.
The prudent just about says it all. The history of Surrey is the history of convenience and commuting. And here at Polesden Lacey, we have a Surrey ideal, a stately home on a suburban scale.
The second house was replaced by a simple Grecian villa in 1824. 6 bays in the centre of the present south front, with an octa-style Ionic colonnade, an attractive impressionistic style, far more concerned with atmosphere than accuracy. A quadrangle with a symmetrical E-shaped entrance front facing east, with a cupola behind, an asymmetrical west front, and a simple open internal courtyard with an apsidal end. Its character is entirely Edwardian, and, be it said, some of the most attractive Edwardian in the country. A living style, related to some kind of emotional need.
Polesden Lacey, it seems to me, is like a stage set for some Arcadian drama. These gardens are like a theatre in that respect, and we're the actors. Well, we're the extras, really, because the actual heroes and heroines, the original wealthy few who could afford to come down here and play alone at weekends, left years ago. The whole point of this, the long terrace, is to take in the view, which is also somewhat staged because while the hand of God created it, metropolitan wealth tended it like a garden and kept it just at arm's length, down there, beyond the ha-ha. After all, that little wall was to keep the view in place and the animals out. Arcady had to be a backdrop for this sophisticated theatre. The presiding genius of Polesden was Mrs. Greville, an Edwardian society hostess who used the place for weekend house parties. When she died, Mrs. Greville gave Polesden Lacey to the National Trust for the enjoyment of Londoners, which was nice of her because we used to come here on Sunday afternoons, along with everybody else. A lot of people from Surrey are landed gentry in attitude, and places like this enable them to act out the role, for an afternoon at least. I suppose that Polesden must have had thousands of pretend owners sharing its mellowed elegance before going home to somewhat humbler dwellings. Surrey is a place you come home to do the gardening and tend to the view. It's a place for Sunday activities, which, it seems to me, are always slightly melancholy. Whenever I think of Surrey, I think of the eternal sunset of a permanent Sunday afternoon.
The fame of Payne's Hill was its grounds, laid out picturesquely by the Honourable Charles Hamilton, son of the Earl of Abercorn, in the 1740s. Now they are sadly neglected, and many of the ornamental structures are going or gone.
Good morning.
Hello.
May I help you?
Yeah, I'm looking through Pevsner's Guide to Surrey, and I've just got to Payne's Hill, and it says that all this lot's fallen down now. It's all
Things have
gone.
changed a little since then.
Really?
It stayed derelict until the 1970s, and then, well, in 1981, the Paynes Hill Trust was set up to restore it.
Wow. So, what, you mean, so there's stuff in there now?
Yes.
You can have a look.
Would you like me to show you around?
That would be terrific if you can, yeah. I'll just get in the car.
I'll open the gate.
Thanks.
Still a lot of missing features and missing buildings, which we fully intend to reconstruct. But yes, we've got a long way with the restoration. I'm very pleased with the progress.
Yes, it looks spectacular. So which way do I go?
I would suggest going in that direction and seeing what you find.
Terrific. Well,
All right.
thanks very much.
Have a good tour.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Follies deserve a very special place in Surrey. There are enough of them to suggest that they were put up not so much as a mark of eccentricity as because they were part of a fashion to be followed by men about town. The sort of men who would be able to stay about town would buy an estate close by. One more kind of suburbanization.
If Polesden showed us the Gardener's Theatre, here at Payne's Hill the garden's become the play itself, unfolding its drama in a succession of increasingly romantic tableaux. What ended up as the garden gnome began with the recreation of those fabulous sights seen on the grand tour by wealthy 18th century Englishmen. A Turkish tent, a fairy tale grotto, an untenanted mausoleum, a Chinese bridge. There was even a hermitage with a live hermit. These were the white knuckle rides of the landed gentry, their inspiration brought over from abroad in a way that turned the rest of the world into a kind of cultural IKEA. It's rather like a rehearsal for Oscar Wilde's idea that the artificial was infinitely more beautiful than the real. I came, I saw, I coloured it in. But herein lie certain ironies. Take this, for instance. It was built to look like a moody ruin. But then, because it was in danger of falling into actual ruin and disappearing altogether, it had to be restored to make it look like the right sort of ruin again. It's all rather confusing. As aesthetic stimulants, these follies enabled fantasy. But poor Charles Hamilton, who laid out these aptly named pleasure grounds, could never quite afford a room as spectacular as his view. As Pevsner points out in a chiding little footnote, not unexpectedly, Hamilton went bankrupt as a result of his extravagance.
Leith Hill, 4 miles southwest of Dorking, the highest point in Surrey and in southeast England, 965 feet, now made up to exactly 1,000 feet by the Folly Tower on top. This was built by Richard Howell of Bristol in 1766, heightened in 1788, and given battlements and an oversized stair turret in 1864. Stone built with brick dressings.
There's pedantry for you. You could call it a suburban neatness, wanting to round a hill off to the nearest 1,000 foot. Is this Surrey need to impose your personality through your property onto nature? It has been said that Richard Hull is buried under this tower, vertically and upside down, so as to be at attention on Judgment Day, when the world itself is turned upside down. Only he isn't. This was a factual error that was passed from book to book with a disregard for field work which Pevsner would never tolerate. It's a tomb with a view.
Brookwood Cemetery, founded in 1854 on 2,400 acres of heathland by the London Necropolis Company, when dying Londoners became a serious numerical problem. Whoever did the landscaping made a magnificent job of it, planting Wellingtonias and big conifers that have matured splendidly to give a somber, complex landscape unlike anything anywhere else in the country. Originally, a railway line served it, with 2 simple, white-painted wood station buildings. The chapels are not of interest, but some of the mausolea are, ranging from the Gothic caskets, like the Bent Mausoleum, to the late 17th century English style, like the Wood Mausoleum.
Here, more than anywhere, I can fully understand Pevsner's bulletproof headscarf of architectural history. How much better to think about the design of a tomb than the inevitability of being in one. Down in the earth, there is no view. And this is the final commute on the Death Railway from Waterloo to the station beyond the last stop. The population here is 232,000 burials. That's nearly twice the population of Guildford today. This is suburbia for the dead, with endless avenues and crescents and cul-de-sacs, and even some local amateur dramatics. But I wonder how many real Londoners wanted to be buried in this suburban vale. Somehow, the expression "gone but not forgotten" seems weaker here. Ubiquitous Surrey pines. They're like transmitters of melancholy, and Brookwood is their broadcasting house.
Guildford. Introduction. Few towns in the south of England are as topographically blunt as Guildford. What gives Guildford its character is that the High Street is steep, convex, and immediately answered by the Mount on the other side of the river, The viewer is always in a cat's cradle, always like a swimmer in midstream, aware of both banks simultaneously. A linear town is thus given a genuinely linear fulfillment, and the way in which this is heightened by the buildings makes it one of the best old towns near London.
Pevsner's guides are known as the Bibles of architectural history, but what was his theology? Well, it's a rather ordered view of the universe, somewhat godless, but with historical accuracy as its central creed. The world is made less mysterious and thus less threatening by the desire to ascribe the right date to everything. For Pevsner, one feels, it's only bricks and mortar. And bricks and mortar, I think, absorb all of the lives that they've witnessed. Buildings are like psychic tape recorders. Pevsner plugs them in, but he doesn't want to listen to the tapes.
The job of designing Guildford Cathedral was won in open competition by Sir Edward Morph in 1932. The porches and the West End were completed in 1966. The result is a cruciform church with bulky central tower, all in brick with a minimum of stone dressings.
Right from the off, with Morph winning this commission in an open competition, this cathedral seems to be about a new spirit of classlessness in England, the civic spirit of the 1950s. The money for it, too, was raised by the people of Guildford. No single patron erected this church as much to their own glory as to God's.
The outside looks as though it will never be more than a well-mannered postscript to the Gothic revival. But Morph's ability to create interior spaces expresses itself in spite of the style. The result is a very impressive and sober, free Gothic central vessel.
Look at the openness of this building. Has all the light and straight lines, the democratically civic ethos that was urged by the Festival of Britain. In fact, it's a bit like God's Festival Hall, with seating from a Green Line bus to paradise.
Blessed are you, sovereign God, our light and our life. To you be glory and praise forever. Your living word brings light out of darkness, and daily your spirit renews the face of the earth. Bend our wills to the gentle will of your love.
Away with the darkly cloistered, hierarchical mysticism of Victorian medievalism. In with the light of a bright new Britain, a sense of civic equality in the eyes of a newly nationalised God. You know, this place reminds me of Powell and Pressburger's depiction of heaven in A Matter of Life and Death.
Everyone on Earth has a file. Russian, Chinese, black or white, rich or poor, Republican or Democrat.
Holy smoke. If anybody told me the clerks were working away up here, just like on Earth.
Everyone here is allowed to start how they like.
It's heaven, isn't it?
You see? There are millions of people on Earth who would think it heaven to be a clerk.
Whiteley Village, 2 miles northwest of Cobham. The layout of the village is as formal and symmetrical as that of an ideal Renaissance town. It is the only communal estate in Surrey. With a little more imagination, it could have been brilliant. William Whiteley of Whiteley's Stores, who died in 1907, left £1 million for a village for thrifty old people. The area finally purchased in 1911 for its erection is 225 acres in size. The village was built from 1914 to 1921 by a whole chapter of architects. The style adopted by all of them is, broadly speaking, that of the Hampstead Garden suburb in its Lutyens aspects.
Whiteley Village, as a purpose-built community, is at odds with nearly every other village in Surrey. It has its roots in the Victorian notion of a philanthropic gesture which doubled as a monument to the philanthropist himself. Surveying these tranquil acres, one can think of a rehearsal for heaven, a democracy living in perfect harmony with its surroundings and amenities. As such, Whiteley reverses village society as much as village architecture, for here there are neither gradations of class nor gradations of property. This allegorical statue to industry and enterprise is also a statue to William Whiteley, and for that reason it could be said to lack humility. But surely the important thing is that Whiteley's redistributed wealth has been used to his original intention and has brought peace and security to successive generations of elderly and thrifty Londoners. When you travel with Pevsner, you begin to get a measure of the man, the dogged architectural historian, sniffing out a scent of the perpendicular or picking up a whiff of weatherboarding. Then he does a kind of mental arithmetic with dates and styles until he's worked the building out like a sum, and that's his big moment. But I find that the most exciting thing is trying to actually find the building in the first place. You get a map and some clues and a description of the treasure. Has all the best qualities of Enid Blyton without having to be locked up in a cave overnight with a dog. But what exactly does 1 mile southeast of Godalming mean to the modern motorist? And there could be anything 1 mile southeast of Godalming these days, from an exorcist to a beauty parlour. Bunbury. Now, wasn't that a character out of Oscar Wilde? I'll bet this place isn't even in Pevsner. Excuse me, do you know where Munstead is?
Munstead?
Yeah, Munstead.
Well, you're miles away.
Yeah? Is there any way out of here?
Well, yes. The best thing to do is just keep going round here, follow the road round, and then you'll just have to ask someone.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Bye. This is obviously post-Pevsner, but I wonder what he'd have made of it. Surrey's architectural aspiration has always been to mingle comfort with countryside, a kind of soft-core suburban fantasy which desires the best of both worlds, the urban and the pastoral. For more than 500 years, Surrey struggled to work out this equation. According to Pevsner, the right answer was finally found when Edwin Lutyens, the architect, met Gertrude Jekyll, the gardener. But they seem to have kept the solution pretty much to themselves.
Munstead, 1 mile south of Godalming. No village, simply an area of thickly wooded hills. In the late 19th century, it became famous for the country houses built there, largely by Lutyens. First, Munstead Wood in 1896 for Gertrude Jekyll, the landscape gardener who acted as a patron and who designed gardens which complement Lutyens' houses perfectly.
One thing that Pevsner, armed with the patrician certainty of an historian, never seemed to worry about was actually getting into houses that people lived in. It was a case of open in the name of architectural history, and open they did. But I've made an appointment for fear of dogs and man-traps. We take our security very seriously in Surrey. Hello, Lady Clark.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Michael Bracewell.
Hello.
Made an appointment to come see the house.
Yes, you have. Do come in.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Gosh, this is absolutely lovely.
Yes, it
really
is amazing. A bit different from Gertrude's day. It was.
Is it really?
Oh, very much so. Yes.
In what way has it changed?
She was quite tough, Spartan lady. She didn't have creature comforts that we believe in today.
And is this some of Gertrude Jekyll's work over here?
Yes, that inlaid ivory which we find on certain doors around the house.
Right.
This is Lutyens' furniture, designed by Lutyens and copied by his granddaughter.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yes, it's solid.
It is. Absolutely beautiful.
And we're very lucky to have it here. And also the table is Lutyens.
So it really is. I mean, it's an absolute monument to Lutyens and Jekyll,
so.
isn't it?
Yes.
Is it a nice house to live in?
Oh, it's wonderful. We love it. And our children love it, and our grandchildren. It's a lovely home with a lovely atmosphere.
You never feel that it's too big?
Not at all. It's quite small. When you live in it, it's quite small.
At Munstead Wood, Lutyens' distinctive free Tudor style is already fully formed, though not fully worked out in a kind of small-scale anticipation of the masterpieces of the next 4 years. The house is U-shaped, with a completely unexpected half-timbered first-floor gallery across the middle. The only interior of interest is the room behind the half-timbering, where Lutyens created a kind of long gallery, a foretaste of later naughtiness. The genius and the charlatan were very close together in Lutyens.
Have you ever actually read Pevsner's?
No, I haven't.
You've never read it?
No.
No, because he describes this as a foretaste of later naughtiness.
Ooh.
Almost as though this gallery is in some ways, a little bit radical, a little bit outlandish. I mean, I think it looks lovely in this house, don't you?
Absolutely, yes. And if you read Gertrude's book, this is what was her feature of the property, and the part that she loved most about the house.
Yes.
You'll never find another Lutyens house with a gallery like this.
No.
Not even the very grand ones.
No.
Well, this is the room where Gertrude slept.
Heavens, have you ever seen her ghost?
No, never, never. If I did, I don't think I'd worry too much. I think she'd be very pleased with what we're trying to do here.
I'm sure she would.
And we love Munstead Wood as much as Gertrude did.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for showing me around. It's
Pleasure.
Incredibly interesting.
Pleasure.
And would you mind awfully if I go and have a look at the gardens?
No, why not? You must see the gardens if
I
you're
think
at
that would
Munstead
complete it. Thank you
Not
very
at
much
all.
indeed.
Not at all.
That's great.
The house was doubtless intended to be integral with the gardens, the total effect that of a continuous give and take between landscape and architecture. Gertrude Jekyll revived or invented the image of the informal English cottage garden, and that is the effect here now.
This, if anything, is Surrey articulate. House and garden, sense and sensibility, in perfect proportion. The room has finally found its view. Lutyens and Jekyll were to Surrey what the Beach Boys were to California. They created a harmony which defined a regional sensibility. God only knows where we'd be without them. Now, according to Pevsner, there's supposed to be an even better Lutyens house around here somewhere. I wonder if I can find it.
Half a mile up Munstead Heath Road is Orchards, 1897 to 1900, one of Lutyens' very best houses, part of the miraculous and short-lived flowering between immaturity and the fatal reversion to classicism. The idea is that of an immensely sophisticated entrance approach, deliberately calculated from the moment one turns into the drive. The visitor sees first an almost windowless, creeper-covered block with battered buttresses. This leads the eye on to the entrance side of the quad and beyond, and through the big barn door arch, running the whole height of the wall. The sensation of walking through to the quad which lies beyond is like entering a fairy palace with a union of buildings, exterior space and landscape as miraculous in its way as anything the Baroque produced.
Having failed to find Orchards itself, at least I can pay my respects to the birthplace of its architect. Lutyens was born here in Thursley, which seems to me like the epicentre of the county, and his buildings in Surrey seem like a mission to recreate the memory of his childhood home. A kind of stylised Tudor idyll by way of the medievalised craftsmanship so dear to the arts and crafts movement. His view was looking back in time. It's this thing about 1900, when England was in accord with itself, between the incarceration of Oscar Wilde as a supposedly unhealthy influence and the outbreak of World War I as a national nervous breakdown. Lutyens gave Surrey, England, and later the Empire buildings that flattered its idea of itself, and the inspiration for many of them came from villages just like this. Afternoon.
Pepper Harrow, 1.5 miles west of Godalming. Pepper Harrow Farm, simple, pretty 17th century farmhouse, L-shaped and tile-hung. Attached to it, the best collection of farm buildings in the county, a complete quadrangle of buildings, the size of a college quad. In the northwest corner of this is a very good tiled and tarred weatherboarded barn with half-hipped roof ends. Along the north side, a complete terrace of cottages in Bargate stone. In the middle of the quad, a granary, probably circa 1600, the style and dimensions of a good market hall. Tile hung above, with few windows, and open below, resting on 25 wooden pillars, one of the best vernacular buildings in the south of England.
Crafted and organic, this granary has a strength of character which, over 4 centuries, has been watered down to produce a kind of low-cow rustic suburbia. You could call it Surrey Light. Even in the early 1960s, though, this brew was not to the taste of Pevsner's guide.
What is worth looking at in the 20th century is a strange assortment in which chronology ceases to matter. It was the crack-up of architecture. poor Surrey was doubly unlucky. Not only did its architecture wither away, but the type of house it had made world famous became, in a debased form, the ideal of speculative house builders, and has now made almost the whole of it into a suburb. As England had willfully turned away from its own native modern architecture, it had to come in as a continental importation, twice as shocking as it need have been. Gatwick Airport, 1 mile south of Hawley. Old Control Tower, 1936, circular and in the international style. A neat idea, done quite without finesse or feeling.
Is this the old Gatwick Airport building?
Yes, it is, yes.
Wow. God. So is that old railway station over there? Was that part of the airport as well?
Yes, that was right. The passengers used to alight there and then there's a tunnel leading from the station right the way underneath to the beehive, and that was the way they came in, up the steps. And do you like me to show you?
I'd love to have a look around, yeah.
Okay,
it's
then.
Wonderful.
Okay, I'll just close this and then...
So this place was called the Beehive, was it?
Yes, that's right.
Wow, good. Terence Conran, I feel, would give his left kidney to turn this place into a restaurant. The style exudes all the glamour and romance of transatlantic travel in the 1930s, and even these swooping staircases and maritime curves remind one of a great ocean liner. It has all the expensive simplicity which, as Scott Fitzgerald remarked, makes the very rich completely different to you or I. It is a unique example of metropolitan glamour, skulking in Surrey as though afraid of being spotted by a friend. Checking in was more like a cocktail party than today's bun fight. They more or less brought the plane to you. It rolled up right in front of the building. And so, bang on cue, London's wealthy had found a new way of flying out of the picture and into a far more exotic view. The only way is up. Now, everything comes from space. Flue, food, even buildings.
The area around East Croydon Station has suddenly become the most consistently modern-looking area in the whole of England. The result looks thrilling from a distance, and from the air, rather like a chunk of inner Johannesburg, but breaks up from nearby into separate buildings, very few of individual architectural merit.
As Gatwick would become the symbol of the flight from suburbia, so the accelerated expansion of London would require Surrey, increasingly, to serve as the capital's dormitory and store cupboard. And Croydon, which in Pevsner's day was still in Surrey, would become London's filing cabinet, with large utilitarian towers to match, whose only glamour came from names borrowed from NASA. Croydon would seem to be the full stop at the end of Pevsner's history of English architecture. It's the beginnings of everywhere looking like everywhere else, with a landscape shaped by economics as opposed to aesthetics. But here in Surrey, that isn't so surprising, because Surrey's always been a laboratory for testing ideas of suburban utopia. Here, house and garden have always been closer together than man and nature. In fact, if Kent is the garden of England, then Surrey's the patio.
It is no longer the inaccessible Wealden County. It is a garden suburb. In places, a very pretty one. And as long as the whole country does not come to look like Surrey, that is a very pleasant thing for it to be.
Streets full of people, all alone. Roads full of houses, never home.